Oh, I hear that debt ticker. Hello, everyone. Welcome to game number 3 and week number 4 of our community FFA tournament. We've got Pollina, Hexapus, Gameslayer, and TrattpingviN appearing on this Mars map that Philothanic, I'm sure, has scattered out for us.
Yep, we have multiple things that you could do here. We do have scavengers, scientists, nomads, and elites. There's plenty of silicon for nomads. There's this really good double high carbon spot next to a bunch of water for scavengers. However, there are nukes on the board, so maybe you're going to look at this nice scientist spot right directly south of the colony with iron and water next to each other. Or you could try your luck founding an elite somewhere. Maybe to the right of the colony you have silicon, aluminum, water, iron, all near-ish by. So there are plenty of options. We do have bribe a claim, so any scavengers or nomads will be happy to see that on the market.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm looking to win, so I'm probably not going to pick a lead. Let's just start there.
Probably, yeah.
There are multiple strong scientist locations, right? Both of these iron water patches can be used for scientists, so that's like 2 spots immediately. As you were saying, you've got iron aluminum in this southeast corner that's near silicon and water, so that's great as well. And there's myriad nomadic locations everywhere. Gameslayer, bold move. Found first spot as elite. That's two elites this game. No scientists in these iron water spots.
The 2 players who do play elites in competitive games are Gameslayer and Hexapus. So no surprise there. The only thing about that is
they've managed to avoid the silicon.
Yeah, and you need
it's everywhere.
A lot.
It's all over the place on this map, and they're not anywhere near
founding over here on this cliff directly to the right of the colony, directly in between the silicon and iron, seems like a much better elite founding location to me.
A nomadic HQ has been upgraded.
I'm not positive about what's happened here, but I guess we're gonna find out how it goes. Other than that, Pollina, I really like, is getting glass kilns online, has already got silicon coming in as a scavenger on double high carbon tiles. There are underground nukes available, but on double high carbon tiles, you can eat a nuke or 2 and still potentially be okay, as long as you're careful about managing those goon squads. Of course, having bribe a claim also is going to help out that scavenger, able to make a lot of money early on and get plenty of bribe claims, even though it's not affected by your cooldown. Finally, TrattpingviN has landed as a nomad with all that silicon and aluminum that's available. I do not like his founding location, though, which we can cover very quickly by saying that, yeah, he has a little bit of carbon near his secondary position. He's a little far away from the water, in my opinion, and didn't need to be picking up aluminum with his secondary found, as he had plenty of it near his primary found.
Yeah, I would have founded the secondary right in one of those science spots that we were talking about. Instead,
yeah, the science location would have made sense, or potentially up near kind of like the medium aluminum that's next to the water. I would have just liked to see him be closer to water. That's all.
That could be an issue. Tratt is going to move into a early geotherm, and Pollina is going to go into HQ3 instead, moving into a pair of wind turbines on the cliff down over here, chasing this high power price. The other thing that Tratt's going to have to worry about as a nomad, Tratt's also putting down 2 solar panels, which explains why he's still in HQ2, is it is a Russian colony, so this electronics price is going to be climbing. Started at 100, so Tratt's upgrades are getting equal with everybody else in terms of glass, and are only going to get worse.
Yeah, not exactly what you're looking for as nomad, but of course not absolutely devastating. It's really that 200 start that you need to be careful of with nomads. Both Pollina and Gameslayer in wind power. Gameslayer has started making money from that, which is good. It was a hefty commitment for him to get into, but it seems to be paying off at this point. Hexapus with the geotherm, not enough to actually make him any cash. Yeah, you're right, even on power. So everybody, that's pretty early power out of a lot of our players. Interesting, given that there's only 2 offices at the colony.
Yeah, Tratt and Gameslayer both are going to make power money from this investment, so they're both happy with it. Tratt probably the happiest because his is the easiest to transition with these 2 solar panels at the top of his northmost HQ, and then having a geotherm for the entire game's always just fine.
Yeah, geotherm is going to be fine. There is this advantage that he has where this geotherm in particular, I mean, we are on Mars. Geothermal borehole is available. I mean, superconductor is available to help out with a building like that. If you get superconductor, geothermal borehole, you're sitting on one power tile, if that, for the rest of the game, quite frankly, and you're going to be just fine with that. Hexapus picks up an extremely expensive Pleasure Dome location auction, but I think it was worth it for him. He was not making money on power. He did not have a huge amount of debt. And, well, he's elite. He's elite in a game with 2 elites. You want to have a Pleasure Dome down.
So this is why Tratt was lagging a little bit to HQ3. He purchased 3 bribe claims for 18k.
Worth it. I mean, interpreted a different way, he spent 6k 3 different times? Effectively for some claims. I'll take that any day.
Mm-hmm. Worth the delay in upgrading, especially considering that he now has more cash on hand than anybody else, although Pollina is HQ4, so that's where some of that cash difference did go to.
Yep, getting back into the glass kilns. Glass has been all over the place for these players. No big surprise given that it was no warehouses at the colony, but an expensive resource early on, so just gotta react to what's happening. That's a lot of farms down, considering food is already falling. Not necessarily what I think Gameslayer needed to be moving into, but we'll see how it pans out for him. And a lot of this is just this steel production. We've had a lot of steel production out of our 2 elites combined, compared to the rate at which they're upgrading, and that's definitely caused a problem. You can see Hexapus transitioned completely out of steel just because it's not very worthwhile to make right now.
No, it's not. Gameslayer is stubbornly remaining in steel. Excuse me. TrattpingviN is going to contest Hexapus' Pleasure Dome.
Probably better than letting a player sit around with a $750+ Pleasure Dome that we saw last game. Now, that player did lose, but I think there were a whole bunch of other factors involved in that particular loss, and the Pleasure Dome probably should be contested, so it's good to see that happening this game.
I mean, with 2 elites, a Nomad and a Scavenger, if these are the only 2 Pleasure Domes, it's still quite possible that Hexapus could get a $700 Pleasure Dome.
That's true. I mean, 2 elites in particular. Whew, that is a lot of population, and on Mars, so certainly could be quite valuable. We can see right now it's estimated at 384. That will, however, drop once these 2 Pleasure Domes are online, and we'll just have to see where they end up landing. 16k for network fires. That I'm worried about out of Hexapus. That means he's 80,000 in debt, not in a C level just yet, but you're starting to push there. He's almost dropped down to C. He's going to need to get upgraded quickly
after this next interest tick.
Yeah, that was a lot of debt to take. I think if I were Hexapus, I'd have been looking at letting that one go.
Tratt freezing Gameslayer's electronics.
Just didn't want competition.
Mm-hmm. No competition there. Also thinking maybe possible to pick up a elite early.
Maybe. Certainly something you can look to do to benefit yourself.
Pleasure Dome, 981 profit.
And Dynamite's going to bounce off that instantly. No big surprise there. The question is, does Hexapus, he does have an extra goon at this point. He had his cooldown, I think, ready to go to purchase that. And that's good, but now the thing about using this adrenaline boost like this is now everybody is looking at your Pleasure Dome.
Yep.
Everybody. That said, 800 profit a second right now, 827. That's pretty good. I think I'd be tempted to adrenaline boost that too.
Tratt first HQ5, 2 full headquarters. HQ levels above Hexapus and Gameslayer. Pollina is over at HQ4. Pollina is researching patents. First one that she's going to pick up slant drilling as a defense from these nukes, which haven't actually been used on anybody just yet.
And finally, we see the optimization center come online. Going to be focusing first on some silicon upgrades. I do like the slant drilling pickup, even if you're not getting a huge benefit out of it for the moment, which in some ways you are. I mean, going up to just 2 adjacent high waters is nice. It helps secure you against these nukes that really should be flying around, because your opponents just have to use so many more of them to be effective. And even if one of your carbons gets nuked out, as long as they aren't both hit, you're on great carbon production. So I really like the slant drilling pickup, but now we're just going to have to see if Pollina can can keep all this active. The optimization center is idle again. Come on, just use all your stuff.
Right before this boost ended, that Pleasure Dome was making 1,185K. I'm sorry, 1,000.
The black market is open for business.
Yes, that's unnecessary.
Right now it's making 592.
That's also good. I'm just throwing it out there. That's a good build, and that's without virtual reality.
Tratt could, rebuild his Pleasure Dome.
Overrated. Having buildings operational, I hate that.
Instead of going for a second one?
To be fair to him, I don't know. You've already got a good Pleasure Dome location. It's cheaper to rebuild than it is to build again, to build a new.
Black market is online.
Right, and it looks like both of them are going to come online. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, but that one was sitting blown up for a long time.
A long time, for sure. That's maybe a little bit unnecessary. Gameslayer, meanwhile, seems to still be struggling a little bit. He stayed in steel a lot. It's been really nice and kept that steel at a price where Hexapus was able to upgrade to HQ4, so that's something. And Gameslayer might upgrade eventually.
Another boost on the Pleasure Dome from Hexapus. Another goon on it. That was a 30k goon, I believe, if I was counting correctly. Yeah. So it just needs to be online for a little bit under, say, 25 seconds, and then it will more than pay for itself.
And it is always nice, of course, to get that extra bit of black market from somebody targeting you. This is an advantage of Hexapus picking up that even very expensive network virus earlier. He can feel a lot more confident about relying on these goon squads and that he's going to get something good out of them, because there, of course, are only nukes, power surges, and dynamite for aggressive targeted actions this game. There is no easy way to just waste somebody else's goon squad. So Hexapus getting a lot of benefit out of each of these goon squads because he picked up the network virus early.
Tratt is going for thinking machines on his patent lab, as both his Pleasure Domes have been blown up by Hexapus. Because of those Pleasure Domes getting blown up, that really expensive repair price, Pollina is ahead of Tratt in terms of cash on hand and HQ levels. Hexapus would use up half of his cash just to upgrade. Looks like he's going to defend himself first. Before doing so, has a patent lab himself, moving into carbon scrubbing, wants to make these chems even cheaper, as 2 out of the 3 are frozen.
Yeah, he's got to be keeping an eye on that chem price, of course, because eventually he potentially wants optimization centers. Those require chems. He's wanting to pick up these patents. Those require chems. He's wanting to use this Pleasure Dome. That requires chems. I mean, chems are just an exceedingly important resource for our elites, and so I like the idea of trying to get carbon scrubbing picked up to help out with that. Geothermal borehole, also quite natural for him. Slant drilling, I'm not as sure about. I don't see him getting a lot of benefit out of that immediately, but long-term still could be useful, of course, in securing plenty of water and or silicon.
So Hexapus has about the same amount of cash on hand once you sell those 3 pips of stock that he has in himself, as both Tratt and Pollina. Pollina has the advantage in patents, and some useful patents, I would say. Slant drilling, nanotech. Cold fusion a little bit less useful.
Thinking Machines comes out from Tratt, and in response we'll check Offworld prices. 34,000 launches for oxygen
how much
for profit.
It costs to put up at Offworld for Tratt.
Just too much.
20k. A lot of that because this electronics price is still super high. The colony is consuming 1.6 electronics a second. Tratt is using up a lot of electronics when upgrading.
Our methods continue to improve.
Those machine shops, they make it a lot harder. I mean, if you don't have a lot of machine shops or warehouses, Offworlds look a lot more reasonable, but that's kind of unlikely.
Going for an Offworld anyway.
That's pricey.
Another boost on Hexapus's Pleasure Dome, making 1.2k a second. Hexapus
down to 1.2.
Build a second one with 4 adjacency. Hex is going to defend himself completely. One of Tratt's is going to get blown up. We have our first nuke.
Finally, nukes coming down. They're going to hit Tratt's carbon, which is interesting. Pollina's going to go ahead and do that. Tratt still has 7 claim returns available, but one of the things this does is because of how Tratt has arranged his tiles, if he picks these 2 up, he's got 3 more hanging loose that he's currently using for food production. So he'll actually have to think about how he wants to handle this. He does pick one of them up, moves it on over to a different carbon, but this has actually hurt him more than an underground nuke normally does for Nomad.
Pollina is sitting on so much money right now. She has all of her stock secured. I think she should start buying into Gameslayer yesterday.
You think Gameslayer's what I'll be honest, yeah, Gameslayer's cheap, whatever, that's fine. Tratt has an Offworld.
Yeah, Tratt does have an Offworld. I mean, so you could make a good argument for either of them. She would pay a lot more money burning through Tratt's defense than she would buying up the free stock in Gameslayer. So there are trade-offs to be had there. It's not a simple decision between the two. Offworld versus cheaper stock.
I'll be honest, most of the time the Offworld does it for me just because these days, in particular, even if the Offworld itself isn't super strong, subsidiaries are going to build them eventually anyway. So if you could pick up a subsidiary that's already got one, then that subsidiary is going to be so much more valuable long-term than other subsidiaries. And that's my concern here is, yes, it's more expensive to pick up Tratt, but he is going to be so much more valuable than Gameslayer. In addition to that, Tratt, of course, was buying a ton of claims early. I don't know how all of that has panned out.
Pollina has caught up to Tratt in claims. Tratt only stopped at 3.
3, yeah. Pollina picked up 3 far more expensively, but Hexapus and Gameslayer only 1 apiece, which means that Tratt and Pollina have the most claims in the game.
The other thing is, Pollina can buy a Gameslayer right now.
There is that.
She can just...
But how far away is she from Tratt? 100,000.
She can just shift, sell everything, shift, click. Yeah, I mean... So, either way...
It's close. It's close.
You can make an argument for both.
Hexapus, I'm kind of wondering what's happened to Hexapus, because he just kind of stopped making money in general. Geothermal Borehole is on the way to help out with his power situation. I mean, he's going to be making an absurd amount of power.
Hex was late to move into a optimization center. Only has 1 optimization center, so it doesn't have the extra and isn't anywhere near getting any of those extra claims from getting a perfect on things. And there are definitely markets that you could go into a perfect as a elite, so that's where that money's evaporated from. It does look like Pollina is deciding to go into Tratt instead. Very soon, just going to be able to shift click buy him. Only 1% of the way there.
Yeah, I want her to just get that done. It looks like that's what she's aiming for as well, just selling down everything constantly. She's consistently only 1,000 or 2,000 away from succeeding in this purchase.
And she has it. There's a red buy button. Bye Tratt.
Gets it done. All right, so Gameslayer, Hexapus, Pollina left on the board. Obviously, Pollina is the threat, considering she has not very much money, but an entire subsidiary with an off-world market ready to go. And let's see, that subsidiary, what is it up to? It is successfully launching silicon immediately, so that's good that it found a launch it can use right away. Always kind of an interesting sticking detail with a subsidiary sometimes when it first becomes one. And it's moved into a whole bunch of farms, so... Oh, and a lot of power. That's actually going to be quite strong, having all these solar panels online. Because, of course, TrattpingviN's debt was going to be zeroed out by becoming a subsidiary, and it's going to be making money very, very quickly for Pollina. That's very nice.
Both Gameslayer and Hexapus just researched financial instruments. They didn't stop the research into financial instruments when everybody's in AA debt or higher.
Or higher, yes.
And carbon is at, or chems are at 313. That's a mistake right there.
Yeah, I do not like that decision to pick up financial instruments. I think that's some of what has happened to Hexapus this game, is not being careful about what he was actually picking up in terms of patents. I mean, if we look at it, for example, he has slant drilling, as does Pollina, but for Hexapus, what's that getting him? He's getting an extra 0.5 iron here, from it, and I believe he is picking up an additional 1 silicon. So it's giving him a total of 1.5 resources is slant drilling. Compare that to Pollina for a long time was pulling in a ton of extra water because of it still is right now. Has been relying on that quite heavily to get water under control. And just in this moment is gaining more resources from it, and also is secure in things like this carbon, things like this silicon that she's in because of it. Just a lot more proper use out of the patents that Pollina picked up than we've been seeing out of Hexapus this game.
Between both of Hexapus's pleasure domes, he's making over $1,000 a second. Just want to point that out.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that Hexapus is pulling in from those. All right, well, there's a nuke. Finally lands on the medium water that Pollina was using. But I don't think that's actually going to hurt too bad because, of course, Pollina has
slant drilling.
Slant drilling with more water tiles off to the west. So it's just... It does force away some of the water, but let's be honest, it's water that should have been transitioned anyway.
Our methods continue to improve.
Yep. We do have a war between Hexapus and Pollina. Pollina will probably win it.
Yeah, she's just in the best spot. I mean, Tratt now making 1,700 a second. She's ahead in terms of stock price. Pretty even in terms of cash. Gameslayer doesn't feel relevant in this battle. He has just never successfully gotten off the ground this game. He does have one optimization center functional. It has almost gotten him an additional claim. He is working on perfect steel, which on the surface looks good, but 800 stockpile already, not near as valuable as it would first appear. That should probably be working away on electronics.
Right.
Optimization routine successful.
Pollina winning the race against Hexapus, despite having left money, simply because Hexapus' stock price is so much cheaper.
So high.
I feel like John Madden making that statement, but
well, sometimes it is actually that simple. Gameslayer, you really should use that extra claim. You really should be using this optimization center.
Offworld is a mistake. Too expensive.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, electronics up at 614. I mean, it's not actually that expensive for him because a large amount of that is going to be wrapped up in this steel. Man, I'm getting some frame drops for some reason here, but that's okay. But yeah, the Offworld just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We are switching into some electronics production now, which seems fairly reasonable. We are upgrading electronics now, which also seems good, but let's be honest, it's quite likely to be too little too late. Pollina, 200,000 away from being able to pick up Hexapus, who himself requires 600. Guys, don't found elite. Just...
And if you do found elite, don't
do
found
better.
So far away from silicon.
Yeah, that was... Ooh, that's... I didn't get that part. I don't know exactly how difficult it was, but you can see these guys are having to ship silicon from very far away because they did have to pick it up. You have to have silicon. You can't just ignore one of your upgrade resources, and that feels like what happened this game.
Yeah, Pollina is very close to finishing this out, especially after Hexapus sells everything out. Pollina can get the buy right now.
Yeah, he was just making himself a little bit less valuable to grab, but it's not going to deter Pollina in the slightest.
And it's not going to help Gameslayer enough. Gameslayer has a lot of that money tied up in a second constructing Offworld.
Yeah, Gameslayer's just... He's got no money actually sitting around to pick up Pollina's stock at this point. And Pollina only needs probably about 678,000 in order to purchase Gameslayer. Honestly, she could pretty easily sell out of those last 2 stock.
Yep.
This is one big downside for her. She can't sell out of 5 stock and just immediately win the game, but she could sell out of 2 and be very, very close to ending this one.
Just a matter of time before Pollina wins it. I think we did see in this game and last game why elites are the least founded faction in this tournament, and I don't think it's because we're playing them wrong.
They're bad. They're bad. That's okay. Play them in 6-player games or 8-player games. They're good then. But yeah, 4-player games, one-on-ones, the elites just aren't going to shine. They don't have time to get their boom economies up and running. There are just so many different pieces they need to fit together in order to really explode in the late game. And 9 times out of 10, they are not going to be given that time, especially at high level play against the strong scavenger, strong nomad players like we're seeing here, who are just going to be able to overwhelm them quite effectively. And that's what we've seen out of Pollina this game. Very targeted, very specific patents picked up by Pollina, and very, very good work to go ahead and get that cash advantage needed to pick up Tratt. And then that gives the late game staying power against our elites, and we're going to see her be rewarded with a win in just a couple seconds here.
Mm-hmm. Only place that elites are close to being competitive right now would be IO.
And I still argue 6 to 8 player games, I found elite every time just so I can build a pleasure dome. I'll be honest. But good win over to Pollina. Gameslayer, everybody going to be throwing out those GGs. She's going to pick it up very nicely. Hexapus did end up being the more valuable subsidiary eventually, as he did not build an Offworld. Just want to point that out.
Potentially an argument for picking up Gameslayer, but well, the only thing I want to say is imagine one of those elites was a scientist, and look at those life support prices.
Yeah, I mean, and oxygen.
Go look at the
nuts.
charts and graphs and look at the history of those life support prices. They're all very, 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 very high.
No, pretty good.
You could then use your scientist advantage to like rush carbon scrubbing and get in on this ridiculous electronics market. Just there's no reason to found elite when there were, especially after the first elite founded.
Yeah, after the first elite came down. That's the thing, because there were really 2 scientist locations.
Good scientist really location.
And you could try and point out, but that water's a little far away from that iron to make it work. No, there were actually only 3 tiles between the iron and the water initial patch. And on top of that, you could pretty easily extend out your steel to then pick up like the water that's adjacent to the iron initially for those 3. And then you can expand up into the other 4 later, potentially. It's just, or going, it was so good. It was so good for a scientist. And we didn't see one, and they were punished.
Yeah,
Pick
I mean,
scientist.
You do have to be a little bit more careful with not blobbing as a scientist. Just need to put a line of goon squads halfway through your blob just to make it a little bit harder to be completely knocked out of all that production, but still.
And make steel. Make steel is important. We learned that.
Also go into silicon. When there's 3 silicon users on the map and only one of them goes into silicon early.
Yeah, that's problematic, as it turns out. Gameslayer saying, not my fault we had a second elite. Well,
that is true.
But you did pick elite. I'm just saying. Maybe unnecessary. Couldn't afford to build the pleasure dome, says Gameslayer. Here's the problem.
Locations were great elite locations. I disagree.
There is no great elite location.
The good elite location was over here.
The good elite location is over this way.
In between all of those resources. I mean, it's a little bit, water can be a little bit iffy, but you're guaranteed to get teleportation, even if you have to license it, so that'll solve your water problems long term.
Yeah, I'm founding elite in the southeast corner of this map, if I'm founding elite at all. It's going to be down there. I can get silicon without trouble. I can get aluminum very, very easily, enough because I don't need that much. There's water to the west, water to the north.
He correctly corrected himself.
Oh, I missed it.
He first said they're good scientists, then he said elite, and I was like, actually, I mean scientist. Either that or we ranted on him too hard. One of the two.
Look, this is where I'm ending up elite. If I'm elite this game, it's right here. But I'm not picking elite because I'm picking scientist and ending up over here. I mean, it's just that simple. Oh, boy. It was a game. It was interesting. But also, I think this was a shining example of if you are elite, it really doesn't matter how much the Pleasure Dome costs. You
go for
it. Build it. You have to build it. It's your one tool. It is your one tool early in the game to actually make some money. You have to be able to use it.
$778,000 in entertainment revenue for Hexapus.
It's a lot of cash. It's a lot of cash in those pleasure domes. especially considering he had 2 of them. And he was actually being contested for it this time. So, the details.